Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about something that I wish I didn't have to, but I honestly believe that it's going to be really difficult for the 2019-20 NBA season to ever restart, and it's a very distinct possibility that this season is just over and we're going to have to wait all the way until the 2020-21 season to see an NBA season again. But really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy the NBA, then consider subscribing. I upload every single day. Okay, so I don't really want to make this seem like I'm overreacting or that I'm being, too pessimistic about the situation. I'm just trying to be as realistic as possible here, and I honestly don't think that there's a way that you can really restart the NBA season at this point. So there's been a good amount of optimism coming out of these reports, whether it be Adam Silver talking publicly on TV or reports from owners and front office members that think, okay, well, maybe we'll be able to get this thing restarted at some point, play some games in August and then run it back later. I find it difficult in reality to think that that's actually going to happen. Like, I understand the optimism and I absolutely appreciate it. And I think that Adam Silver himself has done a great job of trying to lead the league through what is obviously a completely unprecedented situation. But from a logistical standpoint, I don't fully understand how the league is supposed to restart, right? Like, it's not a situation where you can just say, okay, all of our players are now clear. Let's get them all together and let's play some games, because there's a lot more people involved in playing these games than just the players and the coaches. There's all kinds of different staff members that have to be involved in the travel and the setup and the arena day. Even if you're playing it without fans, you have to get broadcasters. And assuming you're going to play a couple of regular season games before the playoffs, there's a lot of logistics involved there. Once you get to the postseason, it's a little bit less difficult because everybody is going from 1 to 2 places within the same series. Maybe you can have it at one site and play all of the playoff games in one site and run it like an AAU tournament. There are some options here, but it feels like something that's going to be very difficult to do in a low risk way, right? Like you obviously, if you're going to restart the season, you want to make sure that you're doing it in a way that there is a very, very small chance that there's any kind of repeat of a Rudy Gobert situation where someone tests positive right before you're about to play a game, or that you restart and someone tests positive at all, right? That's a situation that you're trying to avoid, and I just think it's going to be incredibly difficult to do that. And the more that people think through solutions and ideas, I think they're going to realize how difficult it truly is going to be to restart this season. Just think about it. Like, there was that graph that was going around Twitter when everything first went down. All of these teams interact with each other in like a 5-day span. Like, it only takes like less than a week for all these teams, whether it be travel to different arenas or officials or whatever, to have interacted in some way. And it would just be incredibly easy for a couple of other players to test positive once, things start to resume. And then we're right back where we started. And it's like, okay, why did we even do this in the first place? And on top of that, there's plenty of scheduling issues here. From an individual arena standpoint, these are venues that had other events scheduled. Obviously, many of them have been canceled, but they might not necessarily be working with their full arena staff. Obviously, they're going to really want to have events going on if at all possible and if at all safe. But scheduling wise, it's going to be very difficult. You can't just push it off and say we'll do it in August. Those arenas, those venues might not have availability at that point, which again lends itself to this idea of potentially doing the playoffs all in one place, like it's some kind of AAU tournament. But there's logistical issues there, not to mention what I think is probably the bigger overarching issue here, and what is going to end up being the biggest roadblock to potentially restarting this season. And that is, there's really two options, right? There's cancel the season, do everything the way that you normally would timeline-wise, if possible, for next season, draft, a lottery, free agency, all that stuff on the exact same timeline, and then start next season when it's supposed to. And then the other option is to push all of this stuff back, try and play some games in like August. You've pushed the league calendar back so far that then next season starts in like December. And then from there, your options are either to play an incredibly condensed schedule and either chop some games off of that schedule, or somehow try and play 82 games with, 2.5 months less than you normally would on the league calendar, or have every following season begin in December. And that's the biggest thing that I think there's a misunderstanding about here. It's not so simple, at least to my understanding. It's not so simple as to just be like, okay, this is what we're doing. We're pushing off all these games. We're going to start in December. And now every single NBA season moving forward is also going to begin in December. To my understanding, that's not something that they can just mandate and say, okay, this is what's happening now, right? it has to be some kind of consensus. It has to be some kind of agreement between owners and ownership. And if it comes down to it, and that's the way that they can restart this season, then I'm sure a lot of them would agree to it. But it's not going to be as simple as just saying push it back, start in December, every season after this starts in December. It just, to my understanding, that's just not the way that it works, right? There has to be more of a process involved in making those decisions. And at the end of the day, I think it's going to be difficult to get everybody on the same page, to figure out a plan that works for everyone, when in reality, you probably should just call this season a wash, call it the lost season, start next year in October like everything normally would, do free agency and everything else, the draft remotely with as much low risk, as little risk as possible, similar to how the NFL is doing it right now, where they're just doing everything remote and trying to stay on as much of a similar schedule as possible. That to me is probably the better route, because as much as I want to see NBA basketball, and I miss it a ton, as I'm sure all of you guys do, and I obviously have plenty of incentive for the league to restart, as do the owners, as do the players, as do the coaches. Everybody wants to see the NBA and live sports back. There's no debate there, right? But you have to make sure that when you do it, it's a triumphant return. It's a low-risk situation. It's not going to be something where you're running the playoffs for 3 weeks and then suddenly a player tests positive and now everything that you did to try and restart the season is gone. The season at that point is definitely over, and it's a complete catastrophe from a public relations standpoint, from a reputation standpoint. Everything goes completely down the drain. So for me, again, maybe I'm being too pessimistic. Maybe I'm being too negative. Maybe I'm being too realistic, and I'm so upset about the NBA not being here that I just want to be safe about the whole thing. Maybe that's true, right? But to me, it seems like the safer option, the better option, is to just cancel the season and run everything when it's supposed to be ran, hopefully in a low-risk situation, and move on from there. Like, certainly there are options here, and I think that there's going to be a lot of people within the NBA that are really going to want to push to play out as much of this season as possible, because there's a ton of financial incentive. Obviously, people want NBA basketball back. The owners want these teams that they've put together and that they've put a ton of money into, and that these players and coaches have put a ton of time into. They want to see, the result of all the hard work that they put in, and that absolutely makes sense. But you have to understand that, this is a huge safety issue and a public health issue. And when you start to consider that, it's easy to see a path in which we rush into this and we try and do too much too soon, and it becomes even more of an issue than it already is within the NBA. I'm not saying in terms of a worldwide health thing. I'm just saying from a reputation standpoint from the NBA and how this all looks 10 years from now, it would look so much worse if we restarted the league when it didn't need to be restarted, and it caused not just a lost season, which is what would happen if you restarted it and then there's another issue, another player tests positive, but it would just be a complete catastrophe even beyond just not having this season. So for me, I think the safer option, cancel the season. I wish it wasn't a thing. Maybe I'm being too pessimistic. Maybe I'm being too negative. Maybe I'm thinking about it too much, and maybe things will be fine in a couple of months and they'll be able to do everything they want to do within the schedule and everything will be completely normal. I just find that difficult to believe. And unfortunately, as I sit here, March 20th, 2020, I think that the 2019-20 NBA season is probably over, and it's unfortunate because it was an incredible season up to this point. Plenty of storylines. I was more excited for this postseason than I had been in probably 3 or 4 years. It was going to be a completely wide open season. There's so many different players on new teams and all this different movement that was happened at the trade deadline. All these interesting teams from an individual standpoint, whether it was Houston with the small ball stuff, the Lakers with LeBron and AD, the Clippers potentially rounding into form with Kawhi and PG. Plenty of teams that kind of went all in for this season and aren't going to be able to see the fruits of those risk-taking decisions. So many things went down here that I think, unfortunately, aren't going to see any kind of natural endpoint in this season is probably over. Like I said, I hope I'm wrong. I hope a couple of months from now we're watching NBA Finals games and everything's fine. It doesn't seem like, one, that's a realistic viewpoint, and two, that is the smart thing to do based off of all of the logistical challenges as well as the risk that you could potentially be putting on players, staff, the league as a whole, the reputation of the league, all those different things. And I understand that this is a minor thing compared to everything going on in the world right now. But for me, what I talk about is the NBA, and I really feel like it's a definite possibility that this season is just never going to resume. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.